Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, I have a dear friend with us to talk about what she's doing in the world. And Alison, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and what you love about what you do?
Sure. So Alison Joslyn, as you said, I'm living in Miami and I am working now as an executive coach. And to put that into context a little bit, I actually spent some 32 years as an executive in the pharmaceutical and biotech industries, living around the world, running regions, running global functions. And I finally got to a point where I was both financially stable and in a good, solid position, and also really interested to challenge myself with something new and focus on the part of the work that I had done in the past that I loved most. And that was developing talents, helping people to progress in their careers, and building teams. And so I stepped out of corporate. I invested a year in learning how to become an executive coach. And I've been working with clients for the past few years, helping them to progress in their careers. And, to answer your question, what do I love about my work? Oh my gosh, I so enjoy seeing clients, mostly women, have insights and discover things about themselves that then can help them to see a broader range of choices or options that they have in terms of actions they want to take that will help them move towards their goals. And when they have those aha moments, when they really achieve those goals, it's just such a thrill to be a part of it.
That's very cool. And you have all those years of experience in an executive role to fall back on, to pull into your coaching to help the ladies and the gentlemen that you're working with.
Yeah, exactly. I think their situation is always unique, and whatever solutions and actions they decide to take are going to be the ones that best suit them. But having the experience gives me a good understanding of the context in which they're operating, and I can see the patterns more easily and then help them to see those patterns. So yeah, having that background and that experience really makes a difference.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And you are, and like, I know we talk offline, and you really talk about your enjoyment that you get out of this. Just, putting all those years of experience to work,
Yeah.
and then seeing the growth on the other side for the people that you work with. So that must be very fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, I can give you an example just from this week. I mean, it was just wonderful. I was meeting with a client who is a partner in a law firm, who he's a terrific lawyer, very bright, very capable, is a lawyer in multiple countries, passed the bar exam, talented guy. And he has struggled in terms of running into some difficulties working with colleagues. And that has really kind of held him back from achieving everything that he would like to be able to achieve in his career. We've been working together. We've been exploring different approaches he could take. He's been open to that, and really trying some new ways of engaging people and working with them. And he shared with me this week that his, not so much career, but how he's engaging with people and the results that he's getting, they're just taking off. And he's been put into a high potential group within the firm, sort of track to become a senior or managing partner. And it's making a real difference. And I can see it in his face. His face just lights up. He's so happy with where he is. So, those moments are without price.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It just validates everything that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So I know you have been coaching for a little bit of time, but you also have been in a career world for even longer.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges that you have faced as a professional woman?
Interesting. So I think there's some of the obvious challenges are breaking into roles that have been traditionally male-dominated roles. One example, some years ago, I was selected by my company to become the first female general manager and to go into Venezuela and run the business in Venezuela. And, I was breaking through all kinds of barriers in doing that, and really challenged to, both deliver the results and do the job. But I also felt like there was a challenge and an opportunity for me to pave the way for further women to be able to move into those roles. And so I felt extra pressure to really perform and deliver and do the job. And, I recall so clearly the head of our local industry association, and mind you, I was also the only female in the industry in that role in the country. And he just didn't know what to do with me. And I always had the sense that he wanted to kind of pat me on the head and say, good girl, good girl. And it was a kind of thing where, I found I would just let that roll off. And in the back of my mind, I would be thinking as I smiled at him, you just go right ahead and underestimate me, because we are going to beat the what out of you in the marketplace. And we did.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So there have been those kinds of obvious challenges. Now, as I get into coaching women and I'm sort of looking at things through a different lens, I realize that I, like many women, face challenges of the types of habits we tend to develop, often through the pressures we face in our jobs or through society. Just one example of these is, a tendency for women, more so than men, to be perfectionists. And, that develops as we're early in our careers and we're being asked to deliver, and we're really trying to do our best, and we want to come in there and we want it to be perfect and we want it to be accurate, and we get rewarded for that. And we eventually get promoted for that. Well, great, to a point. At some point, that starts to really get in our way. And especially as you get into more senior roles, perfectionists are a profile that companies are very wary of, because they tend to be hard on themselves. They tend to be hard on their teams. They set standards. They put, sort of enormous pressure on everybody, and they're never satisfied. I'm exaggerating a bit to make a point here,
No, but it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I see it all the time, and women are especially guilty of this. I know I am.
Yeah, and I have been too. And, so now I kind of look back to answer your question in this long roundabout way at my career, and I see other habits that probably were getting in my way, and I just didn't even realize it. That one, there's something that, people refer to it as the disease to please, that we want to please everybody. And again, women have this role in society where we're often looked at as the nurturers, and we want to be the good girls, and we want to be nice to everybody, which means we find it difficult to say no. We try to satisfy everybody. And what we end up with is being overwhelmed. We're not focused necessarily on the priorities, certainly not our own priorities, and often not ourselves. So these are some of the things now when I look back, I thought, oh yeah, I kind of wish I'd known more about that when I was, coming up through the ranks. And I did benefit from having a coach who helped me enormously to kind of improve my leadership style. But I can still look back and I can see so many things that were challenges for me and that are so typical of women in general.
So true, so true. And, a lot of times there's a lot of studies about the fact that women are like, we try to overcome the fact that we're women in the workplace by, we have to feel like we have that job down pat, and we tend not to apply for the next role unless we are like 99% sure that we can do it. Whereas our male counterparts, they apply for the role waiting for, they would be ready for it. And so there's that unbalance in there, and we need to get out of our own way sometimes and apply for that role to be able to grow professionally and personally, for sure.
That is so true. There's a wonderful book I would recommend for any of your sort of female clients or any of the women who might be listening to this. It's called How Women Rise, and it's about 12 habits that are very characteristic of women that tend to get in their way. And one of them is exactly what you just described, which is we have a tendency to overvalue expertise. And, it's that 99% prepared, or I want to be 110% ready before I go do something. And it limits the opportunities that we see for ourselves. It limits us in terms of going after things where, you're never going to go into a new role 100% ready. And you shouldn't be waiting until then. These are opportunities to grow and to learn. And, yeah, you should go for it. I have a story. I wrote a blog about that, in fact, because it was only after I had read that book that I had time to kind of digest that and think about it, that I recognized I had gone on a crazy trip, which is a tendency of mine, as you know. Yeah. I had gone on I think it was like a 10-day riding trip in Iceland, sort of really out there in the middle of nowhere in Iceland on these Icelandic ponies. And they said you needed to be an expert rider. Well, I kind of thought, well, I'm not really an expert and I'm going to go. So, I wasn't falling prey to it in that sense. But as we started off and I realized that everybody around me really was a much better rider. They had much more experience, that, there were things I was going to be asked to do that I didn't really know how to do, which included, jumping across little streams and galloping through, open lands and swimming rivers on a horse. I thought, wow, I hope I survived this trip. And when I got to the end, thankfully, I was still in one piece, unlike some of the other folks. And I always thought, wow, I guess I just got really lucky. It wasn't me. It was just that I was lucky. And it took me, I think, some 12 years to kind of go back and say, well, maybe I did have what it took to get there. My skills weren't at the same level, but I had, the determination, and I really worked at it, and I got to be a much better rider very quickly, and I was like, maybe I was good enough to go, but I had never figured it out until, recently, and really reflecting back on that. So yeah, we can fall prey to those things and never, ever realize it. And that's, by the way, where, having a coach can be so helpful, because we don't see these things easily ourselves. It helps to have somebody at your side who can ask the questions, who can hold the mirror up, who can be a sounding board and say, well, why do you think you're not ready for this? And is that really true?
Right. And you can challenge them, right?
Yep.
That's great. Yeah. And coaches are fantastic. Most people will use a coach, whether or not the athletes all use coaches, but high-level professionals and mid-level and, beginner professionals also have the ability to use coaching. And I know many people who do, and it helps them elevate their game, basically.
Yeah.
Not the game as business or a sport. It just helps them.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because coaching as a, sort of in the professional realm hasn't been around that long. I think it really kind of started coming into being in the late 80s, early 90s. And when it first came into being, it was typically being used in a different way. The companies would hire a coach to help somebody if they were deemed a problem. And this was like a last ditch effort before they would push them out the door. And I think companies have been smart enough to realize that if you're going to be investing resources in an employee, you really want to invest in people who have the potential to grow, to add more value, who can have a bigger impact in your company. So that mindset has really shifted now. And now they've started to even do some kinds of, assessments of return on investment. And, you see some good supportive data showing that that there's a positive ROI. And then sometimes, if the person's in a position where they have a great deal of impact, you can have an enormous benefit in terms of, numbers, the return on investment, what you're paying in terms of getting the coaching support in turn, relative to what you're getting back in terms of benefit for the company.
For sure, for sure. And on that note, if people wanted to reach out to you about your coaching, how would they find you?
So pretty easy. I have a website, AlisonJoslyn.com, and my name is spelled ALISONJOSLYN. There's no spaces there. And my email will also follow the same pattern. And you feel free to reach out to me by email. It's Alison, ALISON, at AlisonJoslyn.com.
Perfect, perfect. And if the readers go to your website, they will see your blog and read that story. Because that's a really, I remember reading that blog a while ago, and it was really impactful. So they're in for a treat if they go visit your website.
Plus, there's a picture of me and my favorite Icelandic pony.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, they are. They're really cute. They're small horses and they're adorable.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. Another question for you is, what is your retirement vision?
Oh, well, this is one that you've been very helpful in helping me to think about. I think first and foremost, I don't want to be experiencing financial concerns. I want to know that I can continue to live a nice, comfortable life and not be worried that, the money is going to suddenly run out and what do I do? I don't want to become a burden to my family or to anybody else. I want to be self-sufficient. Beyond that, I'm a pretty active person. I like to travel. I've gotten now into wildlife photography. I like to do sports competitions. And, all that means, having the resources to be able to go to interesting places, to get the latest and greatest cameras and lenses. And she's going to kill me for that one. And, just be able to do the things that I like to do, which are not enormously extravagant, but definitely require resources. I want to be able as well to be there for my family if they need support or help at any time. So, I think my goals are really to be in a strong financial position that allows me to do all those things.
Yeah, that's great. And I know I tell you this all the time, your pictures, your photography, you definitely are very gifted. You capture the nature, the animals. I mean, gosh, your pictures are so good. So I enjoy every time you post them.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's funny. My mom and dad are now both 90 years old and, knock on wood, both healthy. So at least genetically speaking, I should be in a good position, by the way. And meaning I do need to plan for a fairly long horizon. But I also see what has kept my parents, I think, healthy and, sort of young for their ages is being active, being mentally engaged, learning new things, going out, seeing new places. And so they really kind of inspire me in terms of the life that I want to be leading, for the rest of my life, as long as I'm around. So that's where the photography is just a wonderful thing, because especially in this crazy time with, pandemic and lockdowns and, everybody sort of choosing what risk they're willing to tolerate. I found for myself, having a camera was a wonderful reason to head out into nature. It's something you can do by yourself. I can immerse myself out there. And I've actually found it to be incredibly therapeutic. And, I take the pictures, I learn about the environment, I find new places, I get better with my skills, but I also learn more about the animals and the birds and what they do. So it's just this whole kind of part of my life that I see being part of my life as long as possible.
It's fantastic. And I will continue enjoying.
I hope so.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fantastic and a long time coming. So I appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm Regina McCann-Hess, president of Forge Wealth Management. Thank you all for joining us today. If you would like to find out more about your retirement vision and want to talk that through with me, visit my website at forgewealth.com. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Forge Wealth, and on LinkedIn, Regina McCann-Hess. Make it a great day.